Friday heaters. Think we're at the gym? Psych, we're actually at Eli Ping's studio in Brooklyn, New York. Let's heat it up. I mean, I've always been curious, Eli, like how did this fabric practice come about?
That's interesting. The first work I made that was in this visual vocabulary actually came from breaking up ceramic figurines. The figurines that I gravitated to were nativity scene figurines. And I didn't really know why, that's like not my upbringing. But I realized it was the drapery in the robes that the figures in the nativity were wearing. And I would break those figures into fragments and specifically focused on the draping of the fabric of their garb. And then I glue those together into these forms that actually really resemble these works. That was years ago.
Does that happen like as a young adult, you discover this, or?
In the year after grad school.
Okay.
I went into grad school not really knowing much about contemporary art. I had applied with a photography portfolio, didn't really develop a studio practice. Then I came out into the world. I didn't have many opportunities to show, or any opportunities to show, so I had to develop a studio practice to continue nurturing my aspiration. Like I was starting from scratch. I really had no experience working with my hands outside of drawing. Yeah, I started with those ceramics, and then this process came a decade later though.
Whoa, having some of my own creative background a little bit, like 10 years is a long time to like stay committed before you find the thing. Like, was that hard? It is hard because, I mean, I don't know how it is for others, but you get into being an artist because you have the suspicion that you have things worth sharing. Yeah.
But usually you don't start out with the sort of work that necessarily merits that attention. But yeah, the path is hard and there's a lot of occasion for doubt.
That's very well said. You know, we always get a little bit of the wisdom nuggets here and there, but that was very good. For those who are new, how does this work?
So it's just canvas, like, you know, there's the canvas right there.
Yeah.
I use canvas about the size of a bed sheet and I hang it from one corner and I slash it and then pull it through itself, which gives it this gather, which provides a visual focal point.
So it's like hanging down straight, there's like a hole and you pull it back through?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then a brick. I have these bricks that have untold layers of resin on them. Get hung from the bottom, and the tension between wherever it's hung from and the weight of this is what gives it its form and structure.
So it's not just gravity necessarily. Like some might be hanging empty like that, but some have the brick, or can I say, how heavy is it? Like, what is it?
They all have the brick. Sometimes I have multiple bricks, but yeah, it's gravity. It's the weight of that puts the fabric under tension.
Yeah.
And the tension is what gives the form. It coalesces the form.
Yeah, yeah.
It gives it its visual tension.
I feel like this is another sculptural series that could be done.
I've considered it.
Yeah.
They're staring me in the face all the time.
Then is it hard to balance them out, or they pretty much stand on their own without having to mess with them too much?
As my familiarity with the process advances, I have a sense of how to find the balance. But initially, it was hard to come up with that solution. I experimented with all kinds of bases before I did away with the base altogether.
Yeah.
And there was some like earlier approaches where I had like hidden hardware, but all of that felt like sleight of hand. I was really happy to end up at a solution where the piece supported itself.
Yeah.
And that felt like an important sculptural point to me, that the piece made direct contact with the floor and that it sits on these very narrow feet.
It makes me think too of the editing process of writing an essay in high school or college, of like the best version of it is when you've subtracted as much as you possibly can.
That's exactly it. Yeah, it's a matter of cutting away everything that's not essential. And when you're doing more with less, then you're elevating a set of processes and materials to their highest possible potential.
That is well said. So, and then are these heavy? Are they light?
They're super light. You can touch them here. I mean, like when they're displayed out in the world.
Yeah.
I don't want people to touch them, but they're light,
Yeah.
The materiality is like similar to that of a surfboard or a kayak.
Okay.
And that's purposeful. I sort of make the most impactful thing that I can make by myself and that I can handle and move around the world by myself. That's also been part of my journey as an artist, is to make things that are durable and simple and fit into my life in a way that feels like not too much of an encumbrance.
Yeah.
And hopefully fit into other people's lives in a way that's not too onerous.
And sort of the general Peter's ethos of being kind of like the everyday enthusiast of art. Like, I haven't seen structures like these before. And so in some ways it feels extremely unique and a signature of you. What came first? Was it working with fabric on walls, or was it the sculptural elements that came first?
The sculptural elements came first.
Okay.
And I think of myself primarily as a sculptor, but I'm just as much a fan of painting. You know, painting is sort of the main thoroughfare of art, especially in the post-war period. But I feel like my work is addressed to the relationship between painting and sculpture. Specifically, I'm interested in how the technology of painting, the stretcher, brings an expansive fabric under tension, and in doing that it creates this kind of magic window or platform or stage for perception. And it works so beautifully because we're acculturated to transport ourselves just by virtue of this plane of tension. So those elements, fabric, tension, and perception, are the same things that I want to bring to bear in the sculpture, and do so with the least amount of materials. I think that's why it's just canvas and resin, and then tension is the like constituent physical force that determines the form.
So with the wall pieces, what's the shift here? Like, is it sewn together? They're
stretched like a traditional painting, but they're stitched first. And then the entire composition of the three-dimensional shape occurs in how they're stretched. And then a great deal of like care goes into getting a satisfying form. Like a lot of things, the best ones kind of make themselves, or like the easiest ones.
When you describe tension, that perhaps it's because these materials are so familiar, but then it's just that slight change in tension or surface that makes it feel so unique and so different to me in a very compelling way.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm interested in the familiar. Like, I want there to be a modesty in use of materials and processes so that the viewer can speculate on what the process was. And that doesn't need to be totally transparent. I think usually my work is characterized by a certain amount of ambiguity or opacity in terms of how this thing came into being, but you feel like you are on the edge of accessing it. That sensibility comes to an extent from minimalism and Povera work. My work is calibrated a little bit differently. There's maybe a little more, illusion isn't the right word, but the process becomes embedded in the skin of the work so that it has the kind of like waxy translucence or transparency of skin, you know? And I think my interest in that is that skin interacts with light in a very specific way, and that's what makes people look alive. And a lot of the beauty of a person or a living being is that they're luminescent, you know?
Oh, I love that too, yeah. And I've seen you, I mean, these obviously are kind of on a consistent theme together, but I've seen you experiment with like different colors as well, or like some have been kind of like chromed out and reflective at times. These are more flesh toned.
Yeah, so I have these. This is actually the earliest body of work in this room.
Okay. Yeah, sick.
These are my first mature body of work, or the first body of work that I made where I felt like my visual language came together, and that I was proud of and had a sense that this is work I can continue to stand behind.
So this was kind of part of the breakthrough moment of...
It was, and I think to a large extent, like all of the larger pieces that exist out in space are basically like the positive of the negative space in this piece. And it's just getting that shape and that feeling out of the restraint of this smaller frame.
Yeah.
At the time, I really enjoyed that. Like, I wanted something very intimate that the viewer had to be close to. But after working in this way for a few years, I felt like the gesture wanted to be bigger and wanted to break out of the frame.
Yeah, I was going to ask that at some point too. Are you then burdened with like, okay, how do I keep this interesting for myself? How do I reinvent it?
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like a burden.
Cool.
On the one hand, I'm a bit of a monomaniac, so I can really focus on one thing for a long time. And that's out of the sense that a thing can always be elevated by continuing to pay attention to it. And I've seen the evidence of that, across the years. But yeah, of course, you need to feed yourself with innovation. But I find that it happens incrementally and organically. And in that period where a new body of work is being developed, I have an intuition of what it is, but usually it takes a couple years to develop it and bring it into being. So like these bronze fluorescent works, those are a couple years in development.
These probably are heavier.
They're a whole lot heavier. I think it's probably like 200 to 225 pounds. About
Sweet.
that.
So these then, where do these start? I mean, I'm seeing some texture that I'm assuming it's mold or foam or something maybe?
Yeah, they're made out of packing material.
Okay.
And I can actually show you. I have the positives. Each piece is unique, and it's made from what's called direct burnout. Direct burnout means you don't make a mold. The positive shape gets coated in like a ceramic slush until you have a shell, and then the molten metal gets poured into the negative space of that shell.
Whoa.
Or the styrofoam has to be burnt out first. So each element is unique, and then 4 of these you can see make up one of these, and then and then they're welded together, and that's a kind of like spontaneous active composition.
Wow. Do you ever have to be worried about various is it a lot of chemical stuff going on with the resin stuff, or not?
Yeah. A lot of time, thought, and energy is put into managing the toxicity of the materials that I work with. And I do my best to manage that.
Yeah. I know. I think
this process is not nearly as toxic, actually, mostly because it happens outside the studio.
Sure. It's just resin is the main liquid that hardens.
It's just resin and cotton. So they're just 2 materials.
Okay.
But I mean, there's the vapors from the resin while you're using it, and then there's the really the more insidious thing is the dust from when I'm doing the sculpting, like sanding, filing.
Because like when these start, like if this one's in process, this one's shiny.
Right.
I wish I had a more astute word than this one's shiny.
Shiny is,
that one's not shiny.
I guess the technical term would be gloss, but it is shiny.
And so that's what the resin initially has, and then this is typically what the texture comes down to.
That's the finished texture, and that's achieved through sandblasting, which I don't do myself.
Okay.
But it's actually media blast. I blast it with plastic instead of sand.
Okay. So then is that more about shaping it versus texture?
that's removing like drips or other process artifacts that I feel like don't contribute to the final form or add a kind of legibility that is unproductive for the viewer.
Yeah.
But there's a fair amount of that. So when these are like composed, when they're like put together, they're bonded with the same resin that they're laminated with, and there's inevitably going to be a fair amount of like drip and splatter, and that all gets sanded out.
Yeah. Is that pretty laborious for you, like time-wise?
It is laborious. It is no fun. For some reason, I insist on doing it myself.
Yeah.
But when I do that, I'm in my my rain suit, and I'm like soaked in there, and I have a full face respirator on.
Okay.
But like a lot of things that happen in here, while it's not fun, like I lose myself in it. So I'll be sanding like that for hours, and I don't even notice that like my t-shirt is soaked through and like my body is dripping in sweat until I stop, and then I'm like, this is disgusting.
When you're visioning out a show, do you like to have a balance of the various languages that you use?
That's a good question. I try to thread the needle. I try not to make exhibitions. I try to work piece to piece.
Okay.
And then the exhibition comes from whatever happens to be in my studio by the time the show comes around. Like I have a motto that I use, which is make art, not exhibitions. It's just what's productive for me. But that being said, of course, I'm aware generally of the floor plan of the gallery, and that is sort of clunking around the back of my head to make things that are somewhat appropriate to the space. Mm-hmm. In the long term, art is about creating powerful objects that have a kind of resonance over vast arcs of time and aren't addressed to certain spaces or even certain bodies of work. Generally, if a viewer is going to encounter your piece months, years, or decades from now, it may encounter just one piece, and I want that one piece to have presence or hold its space, not contingent on context or even a grouping.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When you come in on a like normal work day, do you have favorites like that you like to work on, or like you go to the wall first, or you go to kind of in the middle space, or just whatever?
There's always,
required.
I walk into the studio, there's something bothering me.
Really?
Yes, okay. And I knew what it was going to be from when I left the studio the previous night.
Okay.
So there's something to be rectified. But that's a great feeling. It structures my days, my weeks, my time, and it makes things feel meaningful, and it gives me a sense of urgency and purpose. So I love to walk into the studio with a problem to solve, and there's always a couple waiting for me.
Yeah. No matter the medium that I feel like I'm around, whether it's music in my background or filmmakers or contemporary artists, like the patience part of that process is universal, and we all have to tolerate it. And you know,
you want these things to spring into the world full born, but they don't. And over time, you get used to that, and maybe even grateful for it, because it's an awesome thing to see a thing like attain itself so far down the line from when it started, and know that you played a role in ushering it down that path day by day.
Yeah, this was great. You speak so well of like the process and like.
Well, it's a funny thing, because it's like the lessons you learn in the studio. A lot of it is just be patient. Things will work themselves out. You know, take heart.
Put in the time and be patient. There you go, heaters. All of the nuggets go out into the world. Well, thanks you. This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you for sure.